Hello and welcome to this video on a rather thorny bonsai, the Bougainvillea. We say a thorny bonsai as the Bougainvillea family is a family of thorned shrubs. This makes it a figurative and a literal pain at times, much like the knights who say ni. Despite the pain, the same bonsai can produce a truly amazing and beautiful bonsai if handled right, much like all the Monty Python movies. To achieve our outcome, we have a small specimen purchased from a nursery. It's very small, but at the same time the thorns are also small. As a result, that means less pain for us. With this small specimen, our first task is to repot it. We need to do this for 3 reasons. The first is to replace the rather average nursery potting mix that's being used. The second is to provide a wide, solid surface for nabari motivation. The last is to allow us to prune the roots and thereby prepare it for a life in a bonsai pot. It's kind of like being life in prison, but in this case, they don't get 3 meals a day, they get 1 every other week. We will be taking this particular specimen back to a single trunk and wiring it into a cascade. To start with, it will be a semi-cascade, but as it grows, it will be trained into a full cascade. The difference is whether or not it goes below the bottom of the pot. To do this, we will require the branches be pruned away to form the right path. Unlike formal uprights, and for that matter informal upright, we don't have a left, right and back format, but instead, only branches on the outside edge of each bend or elbow of the trunk will be allowed to grow out. These will form foliage pads. This work should be done in winter or early spring. The spring's a good time for trunk work and for wiring that, and winter for pruning in more general terms. The reason we need to work on it in spring for the trunk is, simply put, brittleness. The trunk is quite brittle, and as we'll show later on, that's not something you want to learn the hard way. When pruning, we'll take the branches back to just 2 leaves. This will be a juncture more akin to a form when the 2 new leaves become 2 new branches. This will be particularly important later, and it's a perfect example of ramification. Just bear in mind if your bonsai is bigger, more advanced, or otherwise at a stage where you are focusing on flowers rather than on development and you want to display it, and try not to be too aggressive in your pruning. You'll reduce flower development and therefore a less pronounced display. As we have been planning to turn this into a cascade, we need to work the trunk now while it is still somewhat pliable. As the Bougainvillea gets older, let's say, the trunk becomes more brittle. Brittle branches break, and this is something most people will be at least somewhat familiar with. But trunks do the same. The difference is typically you don't do as much, certainly not as difficult work, with trunks, so the lesson is often less learned, and when it is shocking and often horrifyingly sudden, and is even accentuated with a unfortunate crunching sound. We want to promote growth of branches, but specifically and especially ramification. Bougainvilleas have a stunning flower display followed by a dense, lush canopy. Both of these can be supported and certainly motivated by a greater ramification. The more small branches, the more leaves you get. Also, the more flowers you get. The floral display can range from purple to red, pink, orange, and even to white. And these flowers need to be removed after they finish, flowering. This means that you can have another opportunity throughout the season that you're seeing in the floral display to prune it back again, a little more aggressively. And you may even get lucky that you can do this several times, as if the conditions are just right for what are called terminal tufts. These are extra flowers that show up spontaneously on the end of branches. Now, it requires the right temperature, humidity, and everything else, so just be aware that getting this is a bonus. You shouldn't be relying on it or expecting it. The leaves themselves will show up as a pair, with one slightly ahead of the other. They're just a little bit offset. They're oval-shaped and a darkish green colour. You may find that some species have a slight fur or fuzz, others don't. In, let's say, more tropical areas, and certainly where the temperature is generally higher, your tree will keep these leaves year-round, while in cooler areas they'll be lost until the next spring. So just again, bear this in mind. And the final feature, which is especially nice, is the bark and trunk. You'll notice with ours that it doesn't look like much. As it ages, the appearance will change quite drastically. As it ages, the trunk and bark particularly become knurled and furrowed. That is, you get twists and turns, and you get undulations in and out right over the trunk. This adds a sense of age and a degree of gravitas to the bougainvillea despite being a very new bonsai. And arguably, given most nursery stocks are at most only a few years old, this may only be 3 or even 5 years by the time it starts developing these features. The features you'd expect to see in a several hundred-year-old oak, for example. The benefit to bougainvilleas is that as they get older, they need repotting less often, and this is nice in most cases, but it is also accompanied by the fact that they typically grow slower because of it. We'll go from needing to repot every 2 to 3 years to having to repot once every 3 to 5 years. While repotting is in the future, what we will see in the coming months and years is the damage done in this video quickly being outgrown, so our mistakes and errors will be gone all too soon, and we're not unhappy about that. In an ideal situation, we just need to wait 1 year to make a bonsai out of this. In fact, some specimens, and hopefully ours, will need only one good pruning, some working to style it, and a short period to recover before they look like a much older and a much more established bonsai. But that is an especially optimistic idea, and certainly not one that we are holding out hope for. Thank you for watching this video. If you have found it interesting, consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. Please do post any comments, questions, or suggestions you have below.